everyone, welcome into Bracket Science. It is Friday, January 19th. We are exactly 2 months away from March Madness, so we have a special episode planned for you today. We're going to talk about everything you need to know 2 months prior for making your bracket this year. If you've been slacking on your college basketball so far, just now ready to get into it. I know college football just ended. No need to worry. We're going to get you all caught up. Feel free to go check out some of our other videos. We post podcasts every week, usually 2 or 3 times a week on a week-to-week basis, discussing what's been going on in the college basketball world. Today's episode, we're going to discuss who are some of the best teams in the nation, who are some teams that have been number one throughout the AP poll this year, teams that have experience in the Elite Eight that made the Elite Eight last year. We'll see how they're doing and if they can repeat a sort of run this year. They are very popular picks come March every year. Some of these teams, you may be surprised, may not even make the tournament. We'll dive into that. We'll talk about who some of the teams are that have impressed this year, surpassed expectations, and some of the teams who have disappointed in some of these major conferences, which will lead us into talking about who some of the best conferences are this year. They switch on a year-to-year basis, and they may be more different this year than ever before. Finally, we'll get into some of our mid-major teams that you should look out for. Mid-major, we're talking A10, we're talking AAC, stuff like that. And then we'll get into the low-major teams who may be making a Cinderella run come March, teams like St. Peter's who have done it in the past. Let's dive right into it. Thanks for tuning in. Let's start off with the best teams in the nation. When discussing who the best team in the nation is right now, you can cut it down to three: Purdue, UConn, and Houston. Let's talk about each and every one of them. They all have different reasons why they may be the best team in the nation. Let's start with Purdue. Yes, Purdue lost to Fairleigh Dickinson in the first round last year, but they were great all year last year. They were great this year. They actually started the year 2023 as the number one team in the nation, and they also started the year 2024 as the number one team in the nation. Impressive stuff. They have the best resume in the nation. We're going to talk about them first. We'll also get to UConn. UConn's currently number one in the AP poll, if you just recently checked that. The AP poll, not great, but they do have UConn as number one, and Houston's number one in every computer metric. Let's start with Purdue, though. Purdue's 15-2 on the year. They won the Maui Invitational early in the year, which had a loaded field. They went on a streak where they beat Gonzaga, Tennessee. Tennessee's currently ranked number 6 in the nation, so this win continues to age even better. Tennessee may even win the SEC, which would look even better for Purdue. And then they beat Marquette in the championship game. This post-Maui, Marquette actually moved all the way up to number 2 in the nation, and then Purdue ended up being number 1. Marquette has recently fell off, but they are still a great team. They're still in the top 20 in the nation as we speak. Purdue has also beat Arizona. Arizona was number 1 in the nation when Purdue beat them, and they beat Illinois, who is currently ranked 14th in the nation. Their lone losses have come on the road in Big Ten play to Northwestern and Nebraska. Kind of tough losses there, but Purdue, without a doubt, has the best resume in college basketball right now. If the season were to end right now and March were to start, they would be the number 1 overall seed based on their resume. Let's talk a little bit about UConn. UConn, they have a fight to be the number 1 team as well. They're the defending national championship, and they haven't done anything to lose it yet. They're back to being ranked number 1 in the AP poll as we spoke. Even with losing Adama Sanogo and Jordan Hawkins, they were their 2 leading scorers last year en route to their national championship. This team just continues to get better and better with Dan Hurley as their coach. He is incredible. He has got something special going over there. Their leading scorer is a transfer from Rutgers as of right now. His name is Cam Spencer. He's averaging 15.5 points per game. He is a great player. He has fit in perfectly fine. Tristan Newton is averaging 15.3 right behind him. He may be one of the front runners for Big East Player of the Year right now. He had that huge national championship game last year where he had 30 points, and he has continued to improve throughout this year as well. Alex Caravan and Donovan Clingan are still there. They played important roles in the national championship run last year. All 4 of these players provide double-digit scoring. UConn's currently 16-2 on the year. Their losses came at Kansas, where they led most of the game. Not a bad loss at all. And then they lost on the road at Seton Hall. Seton Hall, much better than you think. We will dive into them a little bit more here in a little bit. UConn has wins over North Carolina, Gonzaga, St. John's, Creighton, a lot of key wins. They're rolling right now. They haven't lost in a couple weeks since that loss to Seton Hall, which has brought them to the top of the AP poll. But finally, let's talk about Houston. Houston is currently number 5 in the AP poll, but they have a resume that you'll see. Houston was the last undefeated team in college basketball. They recently fell 2 games in a row, but they were both on the road in Big 12 play. However, they are ranked number 1 in every computer metric system at KenPom, at Torvik, in the net. They're number 1 in everything. Now you might ask, how does this happen? They're blowing out teams that they should, and their defense is what their points per game is so good. They have the best defense in the nation at KenPom, in the net, best defense on just about everything. They're picking up some offensive slack as well, with LJ Cryer being the man. Transfer from Baylor, he has been great. Houston may, in general, just have some of the best guard play in the nation. LJ Cryer, Jamal Shed, Emmanuel Sharp, all so fast they can score the ball, but what they're even better at is playing defense. Very interesting seeing Houston as a defensive-minded team. They're 15-2 on the year. Their losses, as we said, came on the road in the Big 12, which was TCU and Iowa State, but it was by a combined total of only 5 points, which helps in the computer because that does factor in there. And both TCU and Iowa State are currently ranked, so it's worth noting that Houston does not have any bad losses. They have quality wins over Dayton, Utah, Texas A&M, and Texas Tech. These wins have all kind of aged nicely, other than maybe the Texas A&M one. We'll talk about them in a little bit. But let's talk about some of the teams who have been number 1 in the AP poll. If you remember, Kansas was the preseason number 1. This lasted until week 4. Purdue took it over after winning that Maui Invitational. Kansas actually also played in that Maui Invitational, but they lost in the semifinal game to Marquette. If Kansas would have won that game, we would have had a number 1 versus 2 matchup, but wasn't meant to be. Marquette won. Purdue held that number 1 spot for only a week until they suffered that loss at Northwestern, which made Arizona become the number 1 overall team. Arizona maintained this spot for a couple weeks until they matched up against Purdue, where Purdue took them down and reclaimed the number 1 overall spot. Then they held it for 4 weeks. They were without a doubt the number 1 team in the nation, but then they lost at Nebraska by 16. And then UConn has just held steady, and they are now the number 1 team in the nation. So let's talk about the other 2 teams that have been number 1 so far this year. We already talked about Purdue and UConn. Let's talk about Kansas and Arizona, starting with Kansas. They're ranked number 3 right now in the AP poll. They haven't fell far. They obviously got the biggest transfer of the year, which was Hunter Dickinson from Michigan, along with the incredible improvement of Kevin McCullough. He has been great. They are most likely the best duo in college basketball this season. McCullough's averaging 20 points per game, and Hunter Dickinson's averaging 19. They're averaging almost 20 apiece. And Dickinson is also averaging 12 rebounds per game. So you might think, how is this team not the number 1 team in the nation? You might ask if they have any weaknesses. They definitely do. If the game was a 4-on-4 instead of 5-on-5, Kansas would, without a doubt, be the favorite to win the national title. Along with Dickinson and McCullough, they have KJ Adams, who has gotten better and better. He looks the best he's ever looked so far this year. And DeJuan Harris, he's one of the best pass-first point guards in the nation. He's averaging 7 assists per game. Great defender, has a lot of steals. But the weak spot is the shooting guard position. Without a scoring point guard, you need a good shooting guard. It was supposed to be 5-star recruit Elmarco Jackson. He was supposed to be the guy. No disrespect to him, he hasn't been very good so far this year. He still has a big way to go. Just in the last 2 or 3 games, Johnny Furphy he's a freshman from Australia. He's taken over the reins as the starting shooting guard, and he has been better. He's been a lot better. He can shoot the 3. He's athletic. He's not a threat to take over a game. I know they have Dickinson and McCullough, but if McCullough has a rough shooting night, they need another guy in there. Looks like it's going to be Furphy the rest of the way. Nick Timberlake is also there, and he has also not been good. So they got some work to do, but they're still 15-2 on the year. They beat UConn, as we said. Game was at Kansas, so kind of takes a little bit away from the win, but still obviously a great win. Number 1 team in the nation, UConn. They also beat Kentucky earlier in the year. They beat Tennessee, they beat TCU, they beat Oklahoma. The lone loss did come to Marquette, and then on the road at UCF in kind of a stunner there. UCF, welcome to the Big 12. Their first win was over Kansas in the Big 12. Now let's talk about the last team, and that is Arizona. Arizona's biggest move of the offseason was acquiring former Tar Heel Caleb Love. For those who don't remember, Caleb Love was on that North Carolina team. They went to the national championship 2 years ago as an 8 seed. Then last year, they didn't even make the tournament. They were preseason number 1 and eventually missed the entire NCAA tournament. He was kind of the face of that, he was supposed to be their star and got a lot of hate. So he transferred over to Arizona. He's actually been great for Arizona. He still fires up a ton of shots, but he's been better. Arizona put the world on notice when their second game of the year, they traveled to the number 2 team in the nation at that point, which was Duke, at Cameron indoors, one of the toughest places to play, and they beat them by 5, 78-73. Then after they beat Michigan State, and then they beat Wisconsin, who we'll talk about in a little bit, who is very good this year. They beat Wisconsin by 25. Arizona was the number 1 team in the nation, and then as we mentioned, they lost to Purdue. Since then, they've kind of fallen off a little bit. They've been inconsistent. They lost at Stanford and at Washington State in Pac-12 play, and then they lost a neutral site game to Florida Atlantic, the team that made the Final Four last year, Florida Atlantic, out of the AAC. But even with these 3 losses in the last couple games, Arizona is still the second favorite to win the national championship according to FanDuel. Something interesting to look at there. Purdue is the favorite, and then Arizona. They have all this talent, so it makes sense. I don't disagree. I think they should be the second favorite to win it all. Speaking of Florida Atlantic, let's talk about some of the teams who had great seasons last year, made the Elite Eight, and then we'll see how they're faring this year. And some of them are quite shocking. Let's start with Florida Atlantic because they do have the most interesting resume in the nation. Florida Atlantic, 35-4 last year, made the Final Four, would have made the national championship had it not been for a Lamont Butler buzzer beater for San Diego State to send San Diego State over Florida Atlantic. And Florida Atlantic returned 12 of 13 players from that Final Four team last year. But yet they've already lost as many games this year as they did all of last year. Now, you'd think this would make sense. They put the world on notice. Everyone wants to beat them. They switched conferences to the American Athletic Conference, played a much tougher non-conference schedule, as they should. Dusty May did a great job there. The strange thing is they've beaten all these teams that they scheduled with that are good, quite frankly. They're losing to teams that they should not be losing to. They're losing to quad 4 games, couple quad 3 games. They have wins over Butler. They beat Texas A&M. They beat Charleston. They beat Arizona, as we mentioned. They beat Liberty, Virginia Tech. But then their losses have come to Bryant, Charlotte, Florida Gulf Coast. And Florida, this is not the Dunk City Florida Gulf Coast team. This is a team that won 2 Division I games all year until they beat Florida Atlantic. Then they lost to Illinois, which is understandable, but the other ones are bad losses in general. Just recently, FAU barely escaped Tulane. They just beat Wichita State last night. Barely. They were down big at half. Their test will come once they take on Memphis in the AAC. Memphis is currently ranked 10th in the nation. We'll dive into them a little bit. Unfortunately, Memphis did just lose last night to USF, so Florida Atlantic is tied for first now in the AAC. Along with Memphis, those are the 2 powerhouses there. Let's look at some of the Elite Eight teams from last year that are looking like they might not even make the tournament. These teams, Miami, Texas, and Gonzaga. Yes, Gonzaga, unfortunately. Markview squad is struggling, but let's start with Miami. Miami started off great. They had high expectations this year. They got into the top 10 early in the year, but have just fallen off completely. They lost against Louisville a week ago, and this just solidified where their season's heading. Then they lost to Florida State. 2 bottom-tier teams in the ACC, especially Louisville. Louisville is horrible. This was Louisville's first road win in the last 2 years at Miami. Not good for Miami. They're now 12-5 on the year. Lost 3 of their last 5, all in ACC play. They're probably going to need to beat some blue bloods in order to make the tournament this year, unless they were to run the table, which I just don't see them doing, losing home games to Louisville and Florida State. They're going to need to pick up a key win over North Carolina or Duke. Let's talk about Texas. Texas has just been bad this year. That's the only way to put it. They brought in Oral Roberts guy, Max Abesmith. He took the world by storm. He was the key man in their run a couple years ago. He's great. He's one of the leading scorers of all time in college basketball. He was supposed to take over the role that Marcus Carr had last year. For those who remember him, he was an absolute stud. And Max Abesmith has been pretty good, but this team just can't win games. They're currently 12th in the Big 12. At 1-3, they lost to two of the three worst teams in the conference, West Virginia and UCF. Oklahoma State is in that conversation as well. They're probably the worst team. Then I'd say West Virginia second worst, then probably UCF. Although UCF is 2-2 in the league this year, something to look out for there. But anyways, now Texas has to play a stretch of playing six ranked teams in a row, which you're going to find in Big 12, obviously. But they have a chance to pick up some of these quality wins, and they need them bad. But I just don't think I see them doing it. They seem to already kind of clocked out. Texas has a lot of work to do. Now Gonzaga. Unfortunately, Gonzaga, who could have seen this coming from Mark Few's squad? They're always so good. They dropped out of the AP poll for the first time in like 143 weeks or something like that just recently. Quite frankly, they haven't won a good game this year. They're 12-5 on the year, fourth in the WCC. Their losses are not horrible. They lost to Purdue, UConn, who are the two of the teams we've talked about at the top. They lost to Washington, San Diego State, and Santa Clara. The Santa Clara one. Can't lose that in conference play. Gonzaga is just so used to dominating the WCC. Now teams like Santa Clara, San Francisco, and even St. Mary's are figuring stuff out, figuring out how to beat Gonzaga. I think they're going to have to win the WCC tournament this year to make the NCAA tournament because of their lack of quality wins. They do have an interesting schedule in February where they play at Kentucky. They have a chance to pick up a huge win there against a top 10 team, which would maybe boost them to an at-large bid if they were to run the table the rest of the year in the WCC. But their resume just not good enough right now, unfortunately, for Gonzaga. The other Elite Eight teams last year, we talked about UConn, obviously, already, and then these three other teams, Gonzaga, Miami, and Texas. We also had Creighton, Kansas State, and San Diego State last year. San Diego State was the national runner-up. Creighton and San Diego State have they've been okay. San Diego State didn't have the highest expectations coming into this year. Creighton did. Creighton was preseason number 8. Both teams should fall anywhere between maybe as high as a 3 or 4 seed, drop down to maybe a 7 or 8 seed this year in March. There'll be a lot of people's sleepers picks because they have a lot of experience in the tournament. Both teams returning a lot of the players from last year. Creighton returned Trey Alexander, Baylor Shireman, Ryan Kalkbrenner, and they did lose Ryan Nemhard via transfer. He's over at Gonzaga now. San Diego State brought back Lamont Butler. They have Jadon Ledee, who has been an absolute stud. He's one of the players who has a conversation for first team All-American this year, just out of nowhere. Started his career at Ohio State. Great work there by Jadon Ledee. Big wide body, rebounds well, can score the ball down low. He's a monster. And then Kansas State, they're right on the bubble right now. They just picked up a huge win against Baylor, who was number 9 in the nation. Really helps their chances come March. I have them in our bracketology. We're going to release later today. They are currently in our field, and they do have a bye first round. They're not one of the first 4 teams. Kansas State not near as talented last year with losing Marquise Noel, Keontae Johnson, and Naquan Tomlin transferred to Memphis. But Jerome Tang is just an incredible coach. He's 3-0 against Baylor, where he was the assistant coach under Scott Drew forever. I expect them to be around the bubble for the rest of the year, but they're 3-1 in the Big 12. They've done well for themselves so far. So let's take a little break here, and then we're going to dive into some of the teams who have impressed and some of the teams who have disappointed. Stay tuned with us. All right, diving into some of the major conference teams who have impressed above expectation this year. Let's start with North Carolina. Now, we talked about their debacle last year where they were number 1 preseason, missed the tournament completely, but they have rebounded incredibly well this year. I think it was one of those addition by subtraction things, I guess, whether they lost Caleb Love. Caleb Love went to Arizona, and he's been great for Arizona. He's helped Arizona, but it has also helped North Carolina. Losing Caleb Love, and this has helped because RJ Davis has stepped into a role where he has been absolutely dominant. He would probably be first team All-American right now. Talk about that here in a little bit. North Carolina is currently 14-3 overall and 6-0, alone the top of the ACC. They don't have any bad losses. All their losses were on neutral floors. Lost to Kentucky, a top 10 team. UConn's number one in the nation, and then Villanova. Villanova's been inconsistent, but still, it's Villanova. Good team. North Carolina has beaten Oklahoma when they were in the top 10. Tennessee still in the top 10. Beat Clemson, NC State. A lot of good wins there. They're obviously up to 4 in the nation. So we said RJ Davis, incredible, maybe player of the year. And Armando Bacot was actually the preseason player of the year in the ACC. And he continues to be great. He's averaging a double-double. But RJ Davis has just taken over for this team. They also got transfers in. Harrison Ingram from Stanford has filled a role that was needed. He's a big body, plays the wing, can shoot the three, can kind of get a bucket whenever they need someone to get a bucket. He's been huge. Cormac Ryan, he's also been good. He's transferred from Notre Dame. He can shoot the three. This team's got a lot. They got just about everything you need. They can shoot it. They can drive it. They got a big man down low, and they got maybe the best shooting guard in all of basketball, which is RJ Davis. And then they have the freshman Elliot Cadeau, who is a great pass first point guard. They also have Seth Trimble coming off the bench, who has made a big impact on this Tar Heels team. Tar Heels may not only be the team to beat in the ACC, they could potentially be the team to beat in the tournament this year. They're leaning towards a 1 or 2 seed as of right now. We have them as a 2 seed right now, but they're not far off. If they were to win the ACC, watch out for North Carolina. Let's move into another team that missed the tournament last year, Wisconsin. Wisconsin did not come in with very high expectations this year, and they did not start off great. They start off 1-2 on the year, but since then have gone 12-2 and 5-1 in the Big Ten, currently first in the Big Ten. They're up to 11th in the nation. Their losses, the ones earlier in the year, were to Tennessee and Providence, which not horrible losses. Then they did lose to Arizona, as we said, by 25. Then they just lost to Penn State the other night at Penn State in a road environment. Yet they have wins over tons of teams. Obviously, you'll get that in the Big Ten. They beat Virginia, Marquette, Michigan State, Iowa, Nebraska, Ohio State and Northwestern on the road. They're putting together quite a win column and quite a resume. We have them as a 2 seed right now, even with this most recent loss to Penn State. Wisconsin, very good start to their year. Auburn lost their opening game of the year to Baylor, and then they lost to Appalachian State. It was at Appalachian State, which seemed to make just the AP voters hate them. Ever since then, they won 10 in a row. They haven't lost. They're up to 13 in the nation, 15-2 on the year. Currently the favorite to win the SEC over at FanDuel. That loss to Baylor earlier in the year was only by 6 on a neutral floor, and then Auburn has just continued to improve. And Baylor, we have seen, they're still a top 10 team. So Auburn off to a great start. We'll see how far they can run in March this year. Bruce Pearl does a great job every year. Let's talk about BYU. This is BYU's first year in the Big 12. A lot of people projected them to be at the bottom of the Big 12 this year, but they're currently 14-3 overall. They're fourth in the net. They're looking like a great seed come March. BYU is putting together quite a resume, and they're proving they belong in the Big 12. A lot of newcomers in the Big 12. We'll talk about that in our conference segment here in a little bit. But finally, let's talk about Seton Hall. Seton Hall did not play great in the non-con. Then all of a sudden they are just on a heater. They're tied for first in the Big East with UConn. Who would have thought? We thought it was going to be probably UConn, Marquette, and Creighton battling, and then Providence in fourth, and then maybe Butler in fifth. But it's been Seton Hall who's been the surprise team. They have a guy named Kadari Richmond. He is probably going to be battling with Tristan Newton and Tyler Kolek for Big East Player of the Year. They have been great. They're winning road games. They're winning home games. They're beating everyone right now. Probably the hottest team in the nation right now is Seton Hall. Unfortunately, let's talk about some teams who have disappointed. We already talked about Texas and Miami. Let's just go through some of the major conferences. We'll go Big Ten, ACC, SEC, then Pac-12. Let's start in the Big Ten with Michigan State. Michigan State, not a complete disappointment, but definitely not living up to their standards. They were preseason number 4, yet they're 11-7 on the year. They lost that opening game to James Madison and then kind of just spiraled from there, but they've kind of gotten it back as of late. I still have faith in Tyson Walker and the squad. They're 11-7. They still have enough quality wins where we have them in the tournament right now. They're high up at the net. They're in the 20s at the net. They'll be all right. I think they still make the tournament. They were 7 seed last year and made the Sweet 16. They may do it again this year. The other team from Michigan is Michigan. They're 7-11 on the year. They have all kinds of problems going on over there. Juwan Howard, unfortunately for him, he did have some heart problems, so that's not on him. But then he's getting into it with trainers. He's suspended Doug McDaniel for 6 games, who is Michigan's star point guard, but only 6 road games. He's allowed to play at home, but not on the road. There's weird things going on at Michigan. They just got beat by Illinois last night badly. This Michigan team is horrible. Juwan Howard may be gone by the end of the year. We'll see. Clemson in the ACC, someone we did not expect to talk about. We talked about them so much. They were so good in the non-con. They were beating everyone. They were looking like a top 10 team. PJ Hall, Ian Shiflin, Joe Girard were saying this team just meshes together. We told that every year they seem to play well in the non-con. They get into ACC play and then they just choke. Told people this is not going to happen this year, and it has. We were wrong. They are 2-4 in the ACC. They just lost a home game against Virginia Tech. Yikes. I'm hoping for them to turn it around. We've dropped them all the way to a 10 seed. We had them up as a 2 seed at one point, all the way down to a 10 seed with this rough start to ACC play. They got to get some stuff figured out. Virginia, another team out of the ACC who has been disappointing. They're the worst road team in the nation. They're getting beat by 20 on the road every time they travel. They don't have a good offense. Tony Bennett is such a good coach that they're still going to win games at home. Horrible offense. This team might not make the tournament this year, which is unfortunate because Tony Bennett does such a great job over there. As of right now, they're not looking like a tournament team. Let's move on to Arkansas. Arkansas was ranked preseason. They had very high expectations, and they're just not very good. Musselman, everyone fell in love with Musselman after last year. We saw him take his shirt off after they beat Kansas. But this team's they just have not been good ever since the Battle for Atlantis, where they lost to Villanova and North Carolina. They just spiraled downhill. This team's just not good. That's all there is to it. They've kind of given up too. They did just beat Texas A&M to the big win, and Texas A&M is also our next team to talk about. Texas A&M, with all their talent, they won 15 in a row last year in the SEC at one point. They brought back Wade Taylor, who was preseason SEC Player of the Year. They brought back Henry Coleman, who was a big body down low, and Tyrese Radford. Team was supposed to be good, yet they are 10-7 on the year. They did just beat Kentucky, which is a huge win. This game was at A&M. They're going to have to win some games in conference play. Now they have some good wins. They beat Ohio State. They have some bad losses as well. So their resume, kind of like Florida Atlantic, a little bit up and down, yet a lot worse than Florida Atlantic. Now out of the Pac-12, the most disappointing conference and the most disappointing teams in the nation, USC and UCLA. We'll just group them together. They are both 8-10 on the year. Yikes. UCLA just got beat by Utah by 46. Horrible. USC lost Isaiah Collier for 4 to 6 weeks. They're 8-10. He's supposed to be a lottery pick. I don't know if he'll even come back at all. This is leading for Bronny James to have a starting role on the squad, though, so at least there'll be something to watch for USC because they have not had anything great this year. That's it for our exceeders and disappointments on the year. Let's take a quick break, and then we're going to jump into the best conferences this year and some teams you want to know coming out of these conferences. The best conference right now, as it seems to be every year, is still the Big 12. They have 8 teams ranked in the AP top 25 right now. They have Kansas, Baylor, TCU, Oklahoma, Iowa State, Kansas State, Texas Tech, all coming back. They're all proven in the Big 12, and then they got some additions with Houston, Cincinnati, and BYU. Even UCF, as we mentioned, they're 2-2, which we didn't see coming. We didn't even mention Texas, who's been disappointing, but it's still Texas, never going to be a tough environment to go play at. Kansas obviously has been the best program over the last couple of years, and Houston was the biggest team transferring conferences this year. Houston has been great. I think it's going to come down to Houston, Kansas, and Baylor. I would lean Houston right now. A lot of people like Kansas, but the rest of the teams are going to hover around. They're gonna beat each other up. TCU may be ranked in the 22 or so, and then they'll play Kansas State and they'll lose. Kansas State will move into the rankings, and they'll play at Iowa State, and Iowa State will beat them. Iowa State will move into the rankings. It's just always fluctuating in the Big 12 because everyone you play is good no matter what, outside of a couple teams, which we'll leave out of it as we talked about earlier, like Oklahoma State. But anyways, they're our best conference for sure. Our second best conference is surprising this year. It is the SEC, without a doubt, too. It's not even close. Third, we have the Big Ten, and fourth, the Big East, who are closer. But two is definitely the SEC. Tennessee is a top 10 team, and so is Kentucky. And Auburn is top 10 on a lot of people's lists. Tennessee has a guy named Dalton Connect, who we will talk about here in a little bit, who has just turned this team around. He is one of the most prolific scorers in all of college basketball. Kentucky, as always, has all the freshmen, the fast freshmen, who are so incredibly athletic. And Auburn, we talked about them earlier. They're consistent. They've won 10 in a row. And then Alabama, who we haven't mentioned yet, they're undefeated in the SEC right now. They should be fighting for a title. They got Mark Sears. Mark Sears did tweak his ankle, something to look at there. He's their best player, but should be Tennessee, Kentucky, Auburn, and Alabama all fighting for the title. Other teams that could be considered for March Madness: Texas A&M, we talked about. Ole Miss under Chris Beard has been very good. They're in the AP poll, yet they did just lose at LSU. Don't think LSU will make the tournament. They're in the SEC as well. Georgia has been good. South Carolina has been better than expected. Mississippi State is always a solid program. Then they still have Florida. Florida is one of the more talented teams in this conference, but they've been disappointing. It should be Tennessee, Kentucky, Auburn, and Alabama. All should probably be top six seeds in March as well. As mentioned, the third best conference we have is the Big Ten. It was back and forth between the Big Ten and the Big East. They're very different. Lean Big Ten just because they do have the best team in the nation, which is Purdue. Purdue still has Zach Edey, their best resume in college basketball. We already talked about it. They also have Wisconsin. Wisconsin is leading the Big Ten as of right now. Illinois starting to fall off a little bit. They did just pick up that win against Michigan last night. That loss of Terrence Shannon really hurt. And then there's also Michigan State, Ohio State, and Northwestern in the conference, who will all, I expect Michigan State to be in, Ohio State and Northwestern maybe towards the bubble a little bit there. But as of right now, we actually have both of them as first four teams right now. In the Big East, UConn, Creighton, and Marquette, the teams that were all suspected to be top three, have kind of been disappointing outside of UConn. UConn obviously not disappointing. Number one in the nation. Creighton has fallen quite a few games. They lost that early one to Colorado State. Marquette is 11-5 on the year, or 12-5, excuse me. They just beat Villanova. Villanova also in the conference. And then Seton Hall is mentioned, one of the top teams in the Big East. Providence and Butler also in there, who will be fighting for bids. Unfortunately for Providence, their best player, Bryce Hopkins, tore his ACL and is out for the year. Really stings their season. Butler is on the outside looking in. Big East not they're top heavy. They're very good at the top. UConn, Creighton, Marquette, Seton Hall. And at the bottom, they're just okay. They also have DePaul, unfortunately for them, who is horrible. The fifth best conference in college basketball this year is the Mountain West. Believe it or not, the Mountain West, their records are incredible. They have Utah State. They're currently number 16 in the nation. San Diego State, the national runner-up last year. New Mexico has been great. They just beat San Diego State and Utah State at the pit that they call it in New Mexico. Nevada is also in there. They won the Hawaiian Airlines Diamond Head Classic. Colorado State picked up a ton of big wins earlier in the year against Colorado. They beat Creighton. They got Isaiah Stevens, who's one of the best point guards in the nation. Boise State is also in there. Boise State put people on notice with a couple early wins in the conference play. And then even UNLV is not horrible. They're still in there. They're probably not going to make the tournament, but this conference is deep. We just mentioned 7 teams. At least 5 of them should get into the tournament, I would think, if not maybe 6. As of right now in our bracketology, we have 6 of them in the tournament. Good for the Mountain West. We have them one ahead of the ACC. Who would have ever thought? The ACC is also very top heavy this year. North Carolina, as we said, has been great. They're kind of carrying this conference, and even Duke is ranked number 7 right now. Duke is good. We haven't talked much about them. Kyle Filipowski has been great. He's second in line right now, predictive wise, for Player of the Year behind Zach Edey. No one's going to beat Zach Edey. Kyle Filipowski is second. It's worth noting. Wake Forest has been surprising this year. Hunter Salas, the transfer from Gonzaga, has been great. They're probably the third best team in the ACC right now. It is also worth mentioning maybe Clemson. They're 2-4, but they, as we said, we hate to see them choke like that. NC State is off to a good start in conference play. Florida State, who had a horrible non-conference, they lost to Lipscomb at home. They've only lost once in the ACC. They're looking good. And then Miami and Virginia, both disappointing, but still Miami and Virginia. Maybe they can pull things around. Two great coaches over there. And then the last conference we will mention, our seventh best conference. Their last year, we had to mention them, the Pac-12. Arizona is just carrying this conference as of right now. They're the only ranked team. Colorado, I expect to come in second. Oregon probably third. They just played each other last night, and Colorado beat up on them by 16. Utah is fourth. A lot of people high on Utah because the net is high on Utah. I don't see it. I don't think this team's that good. That they'll be in the tournament. I would think, but I don't know. I don't think they're that good. I saw them get beat around by St. John's earlier in the year. I don't know. Washington State, they're okay. They beat Arizona, as we mentioned. They've been all right. They're better than Washington as of right now, which is strange to say. And then unfortunately, the Pac-12 does have USC and UCLA. Ugh. Those are our conference rankings. Number one, Big 12, two SEC, three Big 10, four Big East, five Mountain West. Keep your eyes on them. Six ACC and seventh Pac-12. Next, we are going to get into some of the mid-major teams to look out for, along with some of the low-major teams to look out for. Everyone loves a Cinderella story. Let's see what we got here. All right, the team I believe that you should be keeping an eye on out of the mid-majors, we're talking A10, AAC, even the Mountain West, it is Dayton. Dayton has been incredible. They're currently ranked in the AP poll. They're 21st right now, 14-2 on the year. They did lose to Houston earlier in the year, but they got a guy by the name Deron Holmes II. He's one of the best players in the nation. He is so good. He's making a case for first team All-American as well. They fire threes, this Dayton team. If they can get hot in March, watch out for them. This is kind of similar to their Obi Toppin team. They have a guy that they can just go to like Deron Holmes. They also play great defense. They're fast. They're athletic. They seem to be the nation's team this year. It is Dayton. Let's also move on to Memphis. We talked about Memphis a little bit. Unfortunately, they just lost last night. They blew a 20-point lead to UCF, and this game was at Memphis, which was strange. They are 10th in the AP poll right now, and David Jones Jr., he has been incredible for Memphis. He'll be on an All-American team somewhere, probably second or third team as of right now. Then they got Javon Quinterly leading the offense there at point guard. He is 24 or 25 years old. He's turning 25, I think. A lot of experience there. He's been just about everywhere. Memphis is very good. Also got to mention FAU out of the AAC as well. Just because of that run last year, they have all the players back. They should be good. They haven't been, but if they get hot come their conference tournament, I think if they win their conference tournament, I'll be more in on them, and they should make another run. I think they have the talent for it. They have the guard play. Their guards rebound at an incredible rate. John L. Davis, Elijah Martin. Elijah Martin's been struggling from the field as of late. If he can get his shot back, he's important to this FAU team. Then we're just going to mention every Mountain West school. Any team, I would hate to play the Mountain West in the tournament. I think Nevada is actually the weakest of them, and then probably Boise State. I think Boise State actually has more talent than Nevada, but Nevada is very well coached. Nevada hasn't played a great schedule so far this year. Utah State is very good. I like San Diego State to make another run this year. I think they make at least the Sweet 16. And even Colorado State, I think Isaiah Stevens wins them a game in the tournament. Those are the mid-major teams that we're looking out for right now. Let's get into the low-major teams because we want to talk about some potential Cinderella stories, starting in the Southland with McNeese State. They may go undefeated in the Southland. This team is that good. They beat Michigan at Michigan by 13. They're high ranked in the net. They're high ranked at KenPom. This McNeese team is no joke. They're well coached. They got a lot of athleticism, got a ton of size. I think we have McNeese right now as a 12 seed. This team they could be that 12 seed to beat a 5 seed, no doubt about it. Princeton, we got to talk about Princeton out of the Ivy League. They're 14-1 on the year. Their lone loss was at St. Joseph's by only a couple. It was a very competitive game. They went on that run last year. They beat Arizona in the first round last year. They got a big 3 over there. They got a lot of talent. I'm in on Princeton right now. They're probably not even high enough for a 12 seed right now. They're probably an 8 through 10 seed, maybe an 11 seed. As of right now, they have a good resume. The computers like them. They're 14-1. They may not even have to play a 5 seed. Grand Canyon out of the WAC. They have the best record in the nation right now. They're 17-1. They beat San Diego State. They got a guy named Tyon Grant Foster. He's incredible. He's averaging 20 a game. This team, I've said it throughout a couple of my other podcasts, this seems like a team that is built for a Cinderella story, just like FAU. We have them as a 9 seed in our bracketology right now. That's exactly what FAU was last year. They may finish the year about, right around where Florida Atlantic was, maybe 2 or 3 losses. I don't expect them to lose more than that, especially with how good their home court is. They have a couple tough games. They got Abilene Christian, Tarleton State. They should beat them, I would think, just based on their talent alone. I'm in on Grand Canyon. I think Grand Canyon wins a 9 versus 8 matchup and maybe even is that team to beat a 1 seed. Now let's talk about Samford. Samford we currently has as a 13 seed in our bracketology, and this is strictly because their opening game they played this year was against Purdue at Purdue, and they got beat by 53. Yikes. Then their second game was against VCU. They lost by 10. Since then, they've gone 16-0, and they're one of the best scoring offenses in the nation. They should win the SoCon. They just beat Western Carolina, who is their competition in the SoCon, as it seems this year. That 53-point loss is kind of scary, but this team has gotten so much better. I think that loss is restricting them from a 12 seed right now. They're our first 13 seed as our best 13 seed rank. I'm rooting on Samford. I like this team. I like watching this team. We'll see how they do. Next up, we have 2 teams, James Madison or Appalachian State. This will be a battle for the Sun Belt. James Madison, as we said, beat Michigan State earlier in the year, and Appalachian State beat Auburn. Appalachian State did just beat James Madison in the regular season. Both teams kind of very similar. They have the talent that could be a Cinderella story. I think whoever wins this conference will be a 12 seed. James Madison would have ran the table, maybe went 29-1 or 30-1. They might have moved up to a 9 or 8 seed, just like Princeton and Grand Canyon. James Madison now has lost 2 in a row. They lost to Southern Miss and now Appalachian State. So watch out for either of those 2 teams. Both teams are very talented. Next, we'll move into the Big West with UC Irvine. UC Irvine, they should win the Big West. It was an undefeated matchup last night where they played UC San Diego. And they beat them by 11. It was a good game, but UC Irvine brought it home. They put up fights at San Diego State. They lost by 1. They lost at Utah State by 10. Lost at New Mexico State, where everyone loses, by only 13. All these games being on the road. They also traveled to USC earlier in the year, and they beat them. USC hasn't been great, but it's still USC. They have a lot of talent. UC Irvine can play with just about anyone in the country. We also have them as a 13 seed right now. I think I like UC Irvine a little bit more than Samford, believe it or not. I see a lot in this team. The last team we're going to mention, we currently have them as a 13 seed as well. They're fluctuated between the 13 and 14 seed, but they have impressed as of late. Out of the MAC, Akron. This team nearly won the MAC last year, nearly won the MAC tournament. They lost to Kent State. Remember that Kent State team was very good last year, but Kent State lost just about everyone. They lost in the championship by 6 to Kent. They returned just about everyone from that team. They went 22-11 last year, and they're off to a great start this year. They kind of started off rough, but they've picked it up as of late. And actually, they play Kent State tonight at Kent State, so that will be a big game. We'll see how they do there. Those are some of the Cinderella stories that you can look out for this year. Maybe not call Dayton, Memphis, FAU a Cinderella story. They've been there before, but watch out for the McNeese States and the Grand Canyons. We'll see how they do going forward. Next, we are going to jump in to our first team All-Americans if it were to happen right now. All right, we have to start the first team All-American list with Zach Edey. Zach Edey out of Purdue is the best player in college basketball. He won Player of the Year last year. He's going to win Player of the Year again this year. They probably don't even have a bet that you can place on DraftKings or FanDuel about him being the Player of the Year, because it's just going to happen unless, God forbid, he got hurt or something. But as of right now, he would definitely be the Player of the Year. He's on the first team without a doubt. He's gonna go back to back in a rare category there. Also, he'll be our center, and then we'll move on to the forward position. As we mentioned earlier, the guy who's second right now would be Kyle Filipowski. Kyle Filipowski from Duke his numbers aren't off the charts. He's averaging like 18 a game, like 8 rebounds a game, but he's just been so efficient in general. He just leads this team. He is their guy. He's the guy at Duke, and that is ever so important because everyone wants to beat Duke. He's been incredible. His shooting percentages are off the charts. He's been great. Let's move on to some of the guards. We have 3 guards on this list. I guess a guard forward, you could say. Dalton Connect, the transfer from Northern Colorado. Who would have ever seen this coming? He started off the year so hot for Tennessee, and you're like, okay, this kid's got some talent. He started rising up draft boards, and he kind of struggled a little bit in the middle of the year. In the last 3 games, he scored 30 plus in every game. He's been going off, shooting an insane field goal percentage. He's shooting 52% from 3 over his last 3 games. He's been knocking everything down for Tennessee, and he has been the missing piece that a Rick Barnes Tennessee offense has needed. He is so important to this team. Dalton Connect has been great. He is rising up draft boards right now. I would love to take him as an NBA scout. Also, sort of in the same category as Dalton Connect at the guard position, kind of a guard forward, Kevin McCullough out of Kansas. Yes, it is Kevin McCullough on our first team list, not Hunter Dickinson. Kevin McCullough has stepped it up. He's averaging 20 a game, and the best part of his game is not on offense, it is on defense. He's shooting a great percentage. He gets to the free throw line just about as well as anyone in the country not named Zach Edey. He has been incredible for this Kansas team. Him and Dickinson, that two-man offense is incredible. Finally, rounding us off, we have RJ Davis from North Carolina. He has been incredible with the loss of Caleb Love. He has stepped into a role that just has been perfect for him. He is the best shooting guard in the country right now. He's not a great passer. They have Elliot Cadeau, so he doesn't need to be a great passer. His role is to shoot the ball and score points, and he has been doing that so well. He scores over 20 just about every single game. That's it. That's our first team All-American right now. Going down the list, Zach Edey, Kyle Filipowski, Dalton Connect, Kevin McCullough, RJ Davis. That is who we would have right now. We'll have to come out with a second team or third team. We'll post it on our Instagram. We'll post it on our Twitter. We'll post it on Facebook. Please follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Bracket Science with 2 S's, and on Facebook at Bracket Science, 2 words. We post everything on there. This is going to conclude our show for the day. Hopefully you got up to date and have everything you need to fill out your bracket. Not fill out your bracket yet come March. I can't say that, but have a basis going forward if you're starting to watch some college basketball. These are some of the players. These are some of the teams to look out for. If you love mid-major ball like I do, check out the McNeese States, the Samfords, the Princetons, the Grand Canyons. They're fun to watch week in and week out. They're kind of like FAU last year. They want to run. They don't want to lose more than 3 or 4 games going into March. Want a high seed like FAU, so they have a great chance to make the NCAA tournament. Hopefully everyone enjoyed. Please give us a like and subscribe. Rate us 5 stars, whether you're listening to Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts. Give us a like on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube. Trying to grow this, continue growing this. Hopefully this gave you a foundation for your college basketball for the rest of the year. Thanks again for listening. Stay tuned. We're going to put our bracketology on our Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Well, we're going to be posting it later tonight, so everyone check that out. Give us a like. Thank you. Have a good night.